Today we're stepping into the dusty, lawless frontier of 1870s Kansas, a place where dreams of a new life clashed with the harsh realities of survival. Imagine a lonely inn along a rutted trail, a flickering lantern promising warmth and rest to weary travelers, but inside a family waits, not with hospitality, but with hammers and hidden trapdoors. This is the story of the Bloody Benders, a family some call America's first serial killers. Their crimes shocked a nation, and their disappearance left a mystery that still haunts us. So, settle in, maybe check under your chair for trapdoors, and let's dive into this gruesome tale. Welcome back to the Basement Files. I'm Ginger, your host, and I'm really excited about today's episode because we're going to peel back the layers of one of history's most gruesome crimes. And I'm just so excited to cover this one because, for one, I love history. Number two, I know a lot of you do as well. And number three, this was just one heck of a journey digging into, and I'm really excited to share it with you all. But before we begin, I want to give a quick shout out to our listeners. If you like diving into the dark corners of history like I do, you're really going to like this episode. You'll also want to join my Patreon so that you can get some bonus episodes and other exclusive content. So your support just keeps me unearthing all of these stories. So with that said, let's head to Labette County, Kansas, where the Benders set up their deadly operation. So it's 1870, and the American frontier is a land of promise and peril. The Homestead Act of 1862 opened up millions of acres, luring settlers to places like Labette County, Kansas, which was a windswept patch of prairie along the Osage Trail. That was a very busy route for travelers heading west to seek their fortunes. Their wagons were creaking under the weight of their dreams, their want for land, gold, and just a fresh start overall. But not everyone on the trail was chasing opportunity. Some were predators, and the Benders were among the deadliest. So, enter the Bender family, or at least the group that called themselves a family. We have John Bender Sr., a German immigrant in his 60s. He was a bit grizzled with a thick accent and a demeanor that made locals quite uneasy. Then we have his wife, Elvira. She was in her 60s, like him, was no warm matriarch at all. Neighbors whispered about her very sharp tongue, and they even called her a she-devil behind her back. Their son, John Jr., he was in his 20s and described as peculiar, sometimes charming, other times laughing at absolutely nothing, and his eyes darting around nervously. And then there was Kate, the star of the show. In her mid-20s, Kate was striking with a magnetic presence. She claimed to be a psychic healer and a spiritualist. And that was a skill that drew very curious travelers like a moth to a flame. Kate's spiritualism wasn't just a parlor trick. It was a big business in the 1870s. The spiritualist movement born in the 1840s had swept America. With people desperate to connect with lost loved ones or glimpse their futures, Kate capitalized on this, advertising her services in newspapers and drawing men to the Borders Inn with promises of clairvoyant readings. But was she really psychic, or just a master manipulator? We're going to get to that. The Benders, they arrived in Labette County in 1870, claiming a 160-acre homestead. They built a small one-room cabin near Cherryville, a dot on the map with barely a handful of settlers. The cabin doubled as a general store and inn, offering supplies, meals, and a place to sleep for travelers. To me, that had to have been a very large one-room cabin to be able to do all of those things. And it was just the perfect setup. It was isolated, yet right on the Osage Trail where strangers passed through daily, often carrying cash or valuables. And the Benders' hospitality seemed like a godsend until it wasn't. It started with a small-town church and led to world domination. Check out Deliver Us from Evil, available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. Just imagine that you are a weary traveler on a long trip. And you see this place, it's an inn, and you're hungry and you're thirsty and maybe even cold. So you stop at the place and you say, "Got any hot coffee?" And this very rough woman says, "Coffee's on the stove," or however Elvira sounded. So she tells you to sit there by the curtain and that Kate will see you. And then Kate, who very warmly looks at you and says, "Oh, you look like a man with a story. Care for a reading? I see things, you know. Your future. Your fate." Sylvia Likens went through something that absolutely no one should ever have to go through. If you haven't, check out the very first episode of The Basement Files. This book, Silence Voices, Sylvia and Jenny Likens' Untold Stories, is the supplemental ebook to that episode, coming soon. Benders weren't exactly beloved by their neighbors. Locals found John Sr. a bit standoffish. Elvira was very abrasive. John Jr.'s odd behavior, which was like laughing at random moments or talking to himself, just didn't help matters at all. Kate was the exception. Her charisma and beauty made her the public face of the family, but even she couldn't fully shake the suspicion that clung to the Benders like dust on a trail. Something about that little cabin felt totally wrong to everyone. By 1871, whispers of trouble started circulating in Lebec County. Travelers were vanishing along the Osage Trail. It was a merchant here, a prospector there. People who'd passed through Cherryville were not reaching their destinations. At first, it was easy to dismiss. The frontier was a very dangerous place. There were bandits, wild animals, diseases, things that we can't even imagine now. But the disappearances, they kept piling up. Some estimate that there were as many as 20 people that went missing, though exact numbers are very hard to pin down, especially this late in history. Because, and back then in the 1870s, they didn't have anything near what we do now to pin these kind of things down. But there was one victim that stood out. His name was Dr. William York. He was a respected physician and Civil War veteran. In March 1873, York was traveling from Fort Scott to Independence, Kansas, when he vanished. His disappearance, it hit really hard because York was very well known and his family wasn't about to let his disappearance go. There was just no way. So his brother, Colonel Ed York, started asking questions, and the trail led straight to the Benders Inn. So how did the Benders pull it off? Their method was chillingly simple yet brutally effective. Their one-room cabin was split by a heavy canvas curtain, dividing the public area, which was a small dining table and store, from their private quarters. Guests were invited to sit at the table, often with their back to the curtain. It was called the seat of honor, as Kate might call it. She'd keep them talking. She was flirting, offering a palm reading, or spinning tales of her psychic visions. Meanwhile, John Sr. or John Jr. would slip behind the curtain, sledgehammer in hand, and it would take one crushing blow to the skull and the guest was done for. Now, imagine you're sitting in this room with Kate, and she's got this very soothing voice. And she says, "Now, close your eyes, sir. I see a journey ahead. Great wealth, perhaps. Do you feel it?" And you, the traveler, you say, "Wealth? Tell me more." And then all of a sudden there's the heavy thud of a hammer, a choked gasp, and then silence. The body was then dragged through a trap door in the floor to a small cellar below. It was there that the Benders would strip the person of their valuables, their cash, watches, jewelry, gold, whatever they had that was worth anything. Later, they'd bury the corpse in their orchard or dump it in Drum Creek nearby. Some accounts suggest that they slit victims' throats to ensure they were dead, which is a grim detail that paints their methodical cruelty. And as a family, I mean, that's just crazy. A family that kills. But anyway, the orchard, meant for apple trees, it became a graveyard, with bodies buried shallowly under the Kansas soil. They didn't even bother to bury them deep enough. So who were these victims? They were mostly men traveling alone, carrying money or goods, people that were unlikely to be missed right away. One of those people was George Launcher and his young daughter. They were killed after stopping at the inn. Another was a man named Henry Mackenzie, whose body was later found with a crushed skull. The Benders' targets were opportunistic, chosen for their wealth and anonymity, I guess you could say. Some stories, especially in the sensationalized newspapers, claim that the Benders practiced cannibalism or sold human flesh. While there's no hard evidence for this, it fueled their legend, making them monsters in the public's imagination. So let's pause for a moment. Let's do something a little fun here. Just close your eyes and imagine that you are a traveler in 1872. You are exhausted, you're hungry, you're miles from nowhere, and you see the Benders Inn in the distance. It's a flickering light in the darkness. Would you stop? Knowing what we do now, it's very chilling to think how many people took that chance, never suspecting the trap. And if you're as hooked on this story as I am, again, join my Patreon. I'm going to have some really cool bonus content on this. I'm also working on supplemental ebooks with these episodes so that you can get more information than what I can really fit in here. So I got some really cool things coming there. So yes, please join it. The link is in the show notes. So the Benders operation ran smoothly for about 2 years, but cracks started to show. Locals noticed travelers entering the inn and never leaving. Suspicion grew, especially after William York's disappearance. His brother, Colonel York, wasn't just any grieving sibling. He was determined. He was a very determined man with very vast resources. He organized a search party, combing the trail and questioning anyone who might know something. When they reached the Benders Inn, the family played innocent. They denied everything. They blamed everything but themselves, of course. They're not going to be like, hey, we did it. We killed him. He's buried in our orchard, or, they're not going to do that. But just imagine you're Colonel York, and you very sternly look at the Benders and you say, my brother, Dr. William York, passed through here in March. Seen him? And then Gruffy John Sr. says, no, doctor. Many come, many go. And Kate, in her flirty, smooth, soothing way, says, oh, Colonel, I'd remember a man like that. I'm sorry, we haven't seen him. Yeah, deniability and all. Anyhow, the Benders, their charm held for just a moment. But Colonel York, he was not really convinced. No matter how much that charm held up, he didn't believe him at all. And locals didn't really believe him either. But by April 1873, the pressure was really mounting on the Benders. It started with a single strand of code that became smarter than us. And it was because of its advice that mankind destroyed itself. Again and again and again. Echoes of Extinction, coming soon. So spring 1873 was the beginning of the end for the Benders. After Colonel York's visit, the family must have sensed the walls were closing in on them, because one day they were just gone. The inn was empty. The Benders vanished like smoke on the prairie wind. A neighbor checking the property found the cabin eerily silent. There were no Benders, no livestock, just an abandoned wagon and a lingering sense of wrongness. A search party led by Colonel York and local authorities descended on the inn. What they found turned their stomachs. Under the trapdoor in the cabin's floor was a cellar. Its dirt floor was stained dark with blood. The smell was unbearable. Can you imagine living in a one-room cabin and having all of that going on beneath your feet? How did they mask the smell? They were inviting more people in, feeding them in that stinky place. There had to be something they were doing to keep the smell down in the cellar so it wouldn't creep up and tip people off when they stopped there. But anywho, they started digging in the orchard, and they unearthed at least 10 bodies, though some sources say that it was as many as 20. William York was among them. His skull was smashed, throat was cut. Other victims included men, women, and even a child. George Launcher's daughter, her tiny little body was buried right beside her father. And that is so sad because usually these people would be traveling alone. In this case, it was this man and his little daughter. But the discoveries, they sent shockwaves through Kansas and beyond. This thing made the newspapers everywhere, and it was very much sensationalized. I mean, the newspapers went absolutely wild. The New York Times, they were calling it the Reign of Terror. The Benders were dubbed the Bloody Benders, and their story became just a national sensation. Rewards were offered up to $2,000, which at that time was a fortune. If somebody could capture them, that's what they got. And there were posses that were fanned out across the frontier. They were chasing leads. Some said the Benders fled west to California. Others claimed vigilantes caught and killed them, their bodies hidden to avoid legal trouble. But you would think that they wouldn't do something like that when there's a $2,000 reward, which was major back in those days. One wild tale, though, is that Kate reinvented herself as a con artist. She kind of already was, though. So I don't know what the whole reinvention aspect of this is, because I don't think she was really psychic. She was just using it as a way to charm people, to get them to trust and to get their attention so that they could be killed and robbed of their possessions. But anyhow, she most likely, wherever she went, used that charm of hers to escape justice. In 2009, a history teacher named Larry Welch and his wife claimed to have cracked the case, tracing the Benders to a possible hideout in Texas. But their evidence was circumstantial. And most historians they remain skeptical, even with the information that these folks kind of dug up. The truth is that we just don't know what happened to the Benders. We don't know if they split up, if they were lynched. Did Kate, the mastermind, did she live on under a new name? The lack of answers only fuels the legend. So if any of you are sleuths out there, do some digging. Let me know. You can go to thebasementfiles.info. There are ways to contact me. You can even be a guest on an episode. We can do a follow-up. I'm also going to be doing some bonus material on this. I know I mentioned that earlier. Just a reminder that that's going to be on Patreon. But anyhow, we just don't know what happened to these people. We just don't. But let's take a quick break again. I'm announcing this one. And when we come back, I'll explore why the Bender story still really grips us now and what it tells us about the dark side of the American frontier. So stick around. Don't forget to visit The Basement Files at www.thebasementfiles.info, where you can contact, complete the guest application, or suggest a show. And be sure to join The Basement Files on Patreon for exclusive content. The link is in the show notes. So as we know, the Bloody Benders left one heck of a stain on American history, one that's very hard to wash out. They're often called the nation's first serial killer family, operating decades before the term serial killer was even coined. Their crimes, which were methodical, ruthless, hidden behind a facade of hospitality, it feels like something out of a horror movie. But this was real, and it happened in a time and place where law was thin and trust was a luxury. So why does this story pop up here and there? Well, part of it is the setting. The 1870s frontier was a place of possibility, but it was also very chaotic. It was the perfect hunting ground for predators like the Benders. Their inn was a trap. They exploited the trust of strangers in a world where survival was often meant relying on others. And then there's Kate. She was charismatic, cunning, maybe the brains of the operation. It seems that all signs point to her being the brains with this whole psychic thing, and how she was a bit of a soothsayer, I guess you would call her, because she worked really hard to get people to trust her, or she just kind of had this thing about her that they automatically did. But we'll never know, because her role does challenge our ideas about who can be a killer. And the Benders' escape, it has another layer. In an age before fingerprints or DNA, slipping away was so much easier. But their clean getaway feels almost supernatural in a way. Their story, it made newspapers everywhere. And while they didn't really have any pictures of them, they did have sketches. And you would think that that would have helped. But anyway, their story, it's inspired everything from novels to even an episode of Supernatural. Yes. And it's very fitting because it was about a haunted inn. But even today, true crime podcasts like The Stuff You Missed in History Class and Legends of the Old West, they revisit the Benders and proof of their enduring grip on our imaginations. So, what drove them? Greed was the obvious motive, robbing victims of cash, watches, horses, but the sheer brutality, the crushing of skulls, slitting of throats, hints at something much, much darker. Some speculate the family enjoyed the power, the control. Others wonder if they were simply desperate, pushed to extremes by the harsh frontier. What do you think? Leave a comment. Tell me what you think. You can, again, hit me up on the website. Hit me up on Facebook. Email me. Do whatever. I'd like to know what you think. Well, that does it for today's deep dive into the Bloody Benders, a family who turned a Kansas inn into a slaughterhouse and vanished into history's shadows. If this story gave you chills, check out the show notes for the link to the Patreon where all of the nifty bonus content is going to be posted. I have a couple snippets from this, some additional information from this episode that I'm going to be posting there. I also have some supplemental ebooks in the works and even more updates on past cases. I'm looking so forward to sharing all that extra content, all those little goodies with you on Patreon. So until next time, keep your wits sharp and your back away from suspicious curtains. And I hope you be good and God bless.